Good morning and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then thank you for joining me. My channel revolves around makeup and true crime, and sometimes it can be one or the other, or a lot of times it can be both. If you are new to the true crime family, I do try to place a warning. This is a true crime video and it will contain graphic and adult dialogue along with adult situations. So if this is not something you like, I do have other videos that are just all about makeup. If this is something that you're interested in learning about or hearing about, stick around. And we're going to go ahead and jump into this story. Today is a story that you probably don't realize that you actually know at least one of the serial killers involved, because especially if you're around my age, I actually did not realize that this was the actual case of that created something. This and I will address that as we go into the case. But this is the case of Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole. These two murderers are infamously known for being the confessions killers. Like, they confessed to over 600 murders, the two of them. And to this day, some of them, they're still being worked on. According to these two murderers, they left a trail of bodies that had been raped, murdered, and cannibalized in the 1970s and 1980s. And they were finally caught at the end of their spree. They had no problem talking about this, and in fact really enjoyed talking about all of their murders. So many murders that even the investigators couldn't really point out what was true and what was fictional. Let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of them, and then a little bit about the other, and then I'm going to kind of work to where they join in and kind of mesh the two stories together. And per usual, I'm going to try to tell you what I'm going to be using on my face and in the makeup. If I miss anything, I will either put it on the screen when I'm in editing, or I will also write it down below in a list in the description of what I've used. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and just jump into the story. Grab a snack and get comfy. And let me tell you a story. This is the Too Faced Soft Black Superfine Brow Detailer. And right now I have been on a basis of these serial killers have been based off of movies. And this movie was called Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, and it was made in 1986. But I will probably watch that later. I did not have time to watch it. I know I look extra tired because I had food poisoning yesterday, and that was super fun. Different kind of food poisoning than I've ever had, but I much prefer that food poisoning than the regular kind of food poisoning. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about Mr. Ottis Toole. Mr. Ottis Toole was born March 5th, 1947, and he was a Pisces. I don't really know if any of you guys like to hear about that, but that's what he was. I'll tell you about Henry as well when I come across him. He was born in Jacksonville, Florida. And his life at home was already really jacked up when he came into this world. So it's like he was born into a bad situation. And so he was kind of just already set up for chaos, if that makes any sense. Now, I will say that, you know, you can overcome the life that you are brought into. You can overcome it. It's just you have to really want to, and some people just don't want to. They kind of accept the cards that they have been dealt, and then they just continue on in them. And that's basically what Mr. Toole did. Ottis was born to a very, very, very Christian mother. Like, she was a Christian extremist. There is a big difference between Christians and Christian extremists. I cannot even stress that enough. Because Christians, I'm a Christian. We are not crazy. We are not like Carrie's mom in the movie Carrie. We're not like that. This woman was more like, think Carrie's mom and Carrie. But apparently, even though she was like that, it didn't stop the rest of her family from being a bit screwed up. His older sister actually molested him for quite some time, and not only that, but dressed him up in girls' clothing to her amusement. And his grandmother actually was not a Christian, she was a Satanist, and she would take him into the graveyard to steal bodies for satanic rituals. So he like had like one extreme to the next, unfortunately. Not just that, but before his dad left, his father would bring in his friends to use and abuse Ottis as they saw fit in any manner, shape, form, anything. So needless to say, it was excessively tough for him. But he left, and that part ended, though his sister still did sexually assault him, and his mom Christian extremed him, and his grandma was taking him to do satanic rituals. So by the time he was in 9th grade, he was like, I'm out, I'm done. He bailed out of school, had no interest in it, but he had a really low IQ. It was around 74, so school was really hard for him anyways. Once at that age, he did start going to gay bars and picking up men. And think about it, in 9th grade, you're really, really young. You're still like 14, 15, depending on when you started school. So he was already going into gay bars at this time in his life. Ottis did later go on to say in an interview that he knew he was gay by the time he was 10 years old. But by 14, there was a local salesman who had propositioned Ottis for some sexual favors. And I'm not really sure if they actually engaged in sexual favors, because that part, I kind of tried to look into it, if there was actually a relationship there. Because the next part seemed kind of out of the blue. The salesman had asked Ottis for some sexual favors, and at some point in time, they were in his car, or Ottis got into the man's car. I'm not really sure of that point in time, and I do really try to get the right details, but I did look around and it didn't really say, and that's why I said did they have a relationship prior? I don't really know, because Ottis was in the man's car, and he did decide that he did not want to do the sexual favors or do the sexual favors at that time, because he ran the man over with his own car. So this making his first murder. And after that, he became like a drifter. During his times as a drifter, he did do other killings and things like that. Prior to meeting Henry, they didn't even join up until Ottis was about 25 or 26, okay? So now we're going to jump over to Henry and get his backstory, and then we're going to dive back into the two of them together. And we're moving on to eyeshadow base. For eyeshadow base today, we are using the Too Faced Shadow Insurance. So now we're moving to Henry Lee Lucas. Now many will say he's the smarter of the two murderers, but not by much. It was only like 11 points. I think he was about around 86 in his IQ. But people who have done interviews with him, they say that he really kind of played that part up. So they believe that he was a lot smarter than what he wanted to portray himself as. Because during his confessions, drawing pictures and also manipulating the system to be taken to crime scenes, and they would take him out to eat, and he was just, either he was smarter than what everyone thought and what he tested, or he was just really good at manipulating, or both. I mean, it could have been any of those, but that is something that people, investigators, people in the case had said. Like, they aren't really sure. He probably wasn't as dumb as he came across, like he wanted you to believe. For eyeshadows today and face, we're also going to be dipping into one of my Ofra palettes and also this Ellen Tracy eyeshadow palette. I've used other things by Ellen Tracy, and I've never used her eyeshadows, so here we go. Now, Henry Lee Lucas was born August 23rd, 1936, and he was a Virgo. He was born in Blacksburg, Virginia, and he was one of 9 siblings. That's a big old family. But much like Ottis, he was born into a family that had issues. Both his parents were alcoholic and abusive. His mother was super controlling, like you could not get out of line at all, or she would completely derail you, and it's your butt big time. And I don't mean in like a hey, I'm gonna spank your butt kind of way. She would whoop them. Now, I don't know if that's because she had so many kids that she felt like she needed to put down the hammer or what, but that's how she ruled. Her mother also prostituted herself, like in the backwoods of their little town. She would prostitute herself to make extra money. Into his teenage years, Henry's sexual deviances just kept growing. He was definitely growing into his unhealthy interests. It is reported that he would have sex with his half-brother and also dead animals. That's disgusting. Both of those things are disgusting. Now, it's probably no surprise that Henry did spend his teen years in and out of jail. In March of 1960, he actually was sentenced to 20 to 40 years for murdering his own mother. He was just fed up with her tale, and so he murdered her. So he was supposed to spend his time in Jackson State Penitentiary, but he kept trying to kill himself. Yeah, not really sure on that one. Like, he just up and just decided that he just was going to take himself out. So he killed his mom, and he didn't want to serve his 20 to 40 years. So he was kept trying to kill himself. So with that, they got a little concerned about his tale, and they sent him off to the Iona mental hospital. But after serving only 10 years, he ended up getting let loose, getting on parole. So this was 1970. 10 years, 1960, 1970. And yeah, they just let him loose. They're like, okay, bye. You only served 10 years of possible 40 for murder, but you can go. Have a nice life. Be good, Henry. Take care. That really didn't last long, because basically why he was out, he immediately pretty much tried to kidnap a 15-year-old young lady at gunpoint, and his butt was tossed back into jail for another 5 years. Which brings us to 1975, when he is released. In 1975, upon release, he decided he was done with his area. He's like, I got to go. He decided to go to Michigan. Now, there are conflicting stories about some of the things here. Some people say that Ottis and Henry met in Jacksonville at a soup kitchen, and other ones say they met in Michigan at a soup kitchen. So apparently the only thing we have in common with this is it's a soup kitchen, because they both were drifters, and they both had just been in and out of homeless shelters and jail and doing their own thing. So that's an inconsistency in this story that had me digging and digging and digging until I was finally like, well, nobody is giving me a for sure. So I just had to kind of guess as we went on. So they met at this point in time, and they really hit it off, like instant besties kind of thing. Like they were just like, yes. They bonded over their interests in rape and murder. Yeah, yep. I mean, you know, nothing like having similar interests. And so they knew right then that they were just going to be each other's ride or die kind of thing. They were like, yes, we have the same interests. We are besties. We are homies. We are in it for the long haul. They were partners in crime. Not just that, but it seems like sparks flew with the two of them. Being that they both were gay, I would say that Henry was a little bit bisexual, because later on in the story you'll find out. But yeah, so they were really just like, hey, yeah, we're going to become romantically involved. Now, there's no real, they weren't really like exclusive to each other, because there are reports of like Ottis burning down a lover's house. So yeah, that definitely means they weren't exclusive, but they had a little temper. So when they had tiffs with their other lovers, they were like, peace out, we're gonna get rid of you. But otherwise, they really shared the same vibe together. They should pick better hobbies, but okay. So after they really had created a bond with themselves between the two of them, they actually decided to just go ahead and pick up Otis's niece, Becky Powell. Yeah, because why not add a third one? Now, Miss Becky, she was mentally disabled. She was like, so they had low IQs, but hers was even lower, so they considered her intellectually disabled. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but she was not on the same, like, I don't think any of them were mentally at the ages that they were actually aged, if that makes sense. So they just grabbed Miss Becky and added her into this, let's just face it, this freaking chaotic mess that these men had been. And this young lady was innocent. But it is said that, I mean, her and Henry hit it off. So Otis's niece and Henry hit it off, even though Ottis and Henry were hooking up. You see what I'm saying? Little triangle there. Henry said that Becky and him, like their relationship, fulfilled the lifelong love and respect that they had been searching for. But I'm going to tell you, that wasn't for life, because they ended up bailing out on Ottis for a little while. Yeah. Yeah. Hooked up, bailed out on his ride or die, right? And they ended up staying with a lady named Katharina Rich. And so him and Becky were all, in love and cozied up and just freeloading off of this lady. And, well, he got sick of Becky. After he got tired of being like a freeloader, I don't know if he got tired of it or Katharina was like saying, hey, you guys are freeloaders, you're gonna knock this off and start paying me some money. Not really sure which one it was, but he was like, nah, I'm kind of done with all of you. And he was not kidding. He was really done. And when Henry is done, he is done. He actually murdered both of them. Yes, his lifelong love that he said. Yeah, that shows, don't believe sketchy people. Don't do it. And he actually lured her into a field, which was probably not hard because he loved her, or she loved him, and they had this relationship going on. And he lured her into this field, and it is said that he murdered her and dismembered her and spread her body parts around the field. They were just picking up body parts all over the field to find her. I cannot say the same about Katharina, because in some ways there are details of the murders, and in other ways there are no details of the murders, because of the fact that They confess to over 600 murders. They don't really know which is which, but I would think that that one was true, but I couldn't find details on it, which I'm kind of bummed because I like to be able to tell you guys that kind of stuff. We're going to use a couple of different primers. We're going to use the new No Poreblem. Yes, I have a terrible time saying that. And that's by Touch and Soul for the face. And then we're going to use for the under eyes, we're going to use the Smashbox Under Eye Primer. And then we're going to do some color correcting with the Pro Conceal in yellow and then the Milani in rose. And then we're also going to add for the face, we're going to use the new Too Faced Healthy Glow Born This Way with the SPF of 30, and this is in nude. And then of course I'm going to use the Too Faced Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer in porcelain and in nude. Yes, I'm skipping the third one. We're going for a little bit more natural look today. After he killed his niece, the two kind of got back together, Ottis and Henry. They just, I mean, I would have thought that Ottis would have been kind of pissed that he killed his niece, but apparently it was just kind of like, okay, whatever. They got back together and did a few more murders together. Actually, I mean, they could have done like 100 more murders together for all I know. It doesn't really give out the full facts of like details of cases that are still, some of them are still ongoing, because even though they confessed, they wanted to know, like, without a shadow of a doubt, if these were their victims. Otherwise, they're just putting out details that might be letting or closing a case before it was actually needed to be closed, which I completely understand. So in 1993, Henry was arrested again. I feel like I'm laughing because I feel like that's pretty much like all this case is about, is like, oh, they're arrested again. Oh, they're arrested again. It's like they were so much in and out of jail. I don't know why they ever got let loose. When you color correct, you notice that you won't need as much concealer to cover up everything. And the funny part about this is the reason he was arrested was not because of another freaking murder. It was actually because he was stupid. Well, I mean, obvious, but he was caught with a deadly weapon. So that's why he got caught and arrested. But by now it was 1983, and I think he was just tired of doing everything he was doing. I don't really know if he was just tired of doing it, because like I said, they believe he was smarter than they thought or that he portrayed, but in truth, who really knows? Only Henry really knows. So at this point in time, he just started confessing to everything, like all kinds of murders that some of them were more believable, other ones were more like out of this world, where they were like, the cops were like, yeah, not really gonna believe that. But some of the, I have gone through some really, really bad cases on here, and I can tell you, I wouldn't believe them if I didn't know that they were factual, because they get to a point where you're just like, there is no way that someone could do this to someone else. And you're not so pleasantly surprised that it comes off and it is true that someone did actually do this to someone. It's just horrific. And so they didn't really want to like ignore anything that this man was saying, like nothing. They wanted to really take into account every single thing he was saying and make sure they documented it, because you never know when it was going to come up and it was going to be true, and if they hadn't documented it, it was going to be their behinds. And in truth, they didn't want to stop questioning him because he just kept talking. So the investigators just kind of encouraged him to talk. You know, like, hey man, you're not going to get in trouble for this one. Just keep talking. Let's go get McDonald's kind of thing. And they would take him out to crime scenes. And like I said in the beginning, that they would take him out to crime scenes and give him some fast food, and he would be happy, you know, like just to go out. And I mean, it's not like he didn't commit some of the murders, so he knew he was going to be in prison. He was just like milking the system. So by the time he did, you know, whoa, that's way runnier than I thought it was going to be. So we're just going to do this. First time use, you know, handle with care. Pay attention to what you're doing. Don't talk. That caught me off guard, can you tell? Let me do some quick blending. Remember how I said, like, when you're nude in the shade of Too Faced, like, whatever shade you are in Too Faced, that's your shade. That's one of the reasons why I love Too Faced, because I didn't even have to shade match, and I just grabbed this, and literally it is my shade. Perfectly. No, see how there's no line of demarcation? Like, I can just easily pull it down my neck. Yeah, stopped in the middle of this, do a little makeup lesson, but you see that? And this is buildable coverage, I will tell you that, because I put a thin layer on it at first, and that's what I suggest when you're doing makeup, especially with a new foundation. If you don't know your concoction or your thickness that you need, I would start with a very thin beginning and go from there. But this is beautiful, and it is so lightweight. I don't even feel like I really have anything on, to be honest. And it has an SPF of 30, and it's not bothering my skin, because I will tell you, sunscreen, certain sunscreens bother my skin, especially certain sunscreens that if a foundation has sunscreen in it, it can really bother my skin. But this doesn't. It's nice. To keep everything from moving all over my face, I'm going to use the Morphe Brightening Pink Bacon Set Powder and the Too Faced Ethereal Setting Powder. Yes, they are like my go-to right now. So for Henry, it is believed that he really truly only killed 3 people, or that's what they're guessing. They don't really know. But I will tell you that he was sentenced to death. This gets me. He was sentenced to death, but it was actually overturned and changed over to life in prison by, at the time, he was the governor, George W. Bush. He was not the president. He was the governor of Texas. And that's where Henry Lee Lucas was at the time. You know how it goes. Henry Lee got into jail, prison, actual prison, not just jail. Got in prison, and if you're, and I'm going to be completely sarcastic here, but still, if you're looking for Jesus, go to prison or jail, because you're sure to find him there, because that's where everybody seems to find him. Not everybody, but the people who are in jail seem to find him there. Now, it is said that he did hang out with the sinners, and he wanted to help these people. So it's not unfathomable, did I say that right? Unfathomable, that he would be there, because in jail. But yeah, if you're looking for him, that's where to go, apparently. Please know that I am joking, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm a Christian, and I can joke about this, and I'm a devout Christian, so I am joking. I am not trying to offend anybody. It's just, if you can't take a joke, don't watch my channel, because I'm very sarcastic. So, like I said, Henry found Jesus in jail. Proud of him. He became a born-again Christian. And honestly, once he was a born-again Christian, he seriously became a model prisoner. The 18 years that he had left of his life, he was a 100% model, by the books, perfect prisoner. He didn't act out. He didn't act fool. He was totally, utterly just well behaved, which is great. And so I really hope that he took it seriously. And obviously they said that he did. That he really did take being a Christian very, very seriously. But as I said, for the 18 years of his life that was left. So Henry Lee Lucas actually passed away on March 12th of 2001 in Huntsville, Texas, and he died of natural causes. For bronzer, blush, and highlighter, we are going to go into my Ofra. This is one of the Pro palettes. This is the Free Spirit Pro palette. I have the other one as well. I love these. You can pop things in and out of them and customize it. I haven't customized it yet. I haven't customized mine yet, but they're really great for vacations. So now we're going to skippity pop on back over to Ottis, and let's finish up with him. So like I said, the dynamic duo had gone on their sprees together, then they parted ways for a little bit, and then they came back together for a short while. They were arrested. Well, when you think about this, like, these guys were on this rampage, and he was no better once he was caught, because he actually admitted to helping Henry out with at least over 100 murders, and he also talked about his own murders. And between the two men, like I had said in the beginning, they had confessed to over 600 murders. 600 murders. Stop and think on that. That's an insane amount. How did they even have the time to do that? Like, I don't know. That just blows my mind. I think that's why the cops weren't really believing them, because it was such a mass amount that it was like, how did you even have the time to just like knock this one out of the park there, friends? You know what I mean? Take a little bit of this powder right here, go underneath. Take this pink blush right here. Ottis, like I said, he got in there and he started just confessing. Now, Henry got convicted of 3 murders. Remember how we talked about that? Just 3. And, but Ottis got convicted of about 6 murders. I'm not sure why they got, even though they were confessing to hundreds upon hundreds of murders, they only got convicted of 3 and 6. Maybe they were confessing because, like, you only have one life to give for a life sentence. So if you're going to get life, then I guess confess to it all. Does that make sense? I don't know. None of this makes sense, to be honest. And though Ottis was also convicted of those murders and sentenced to death, it was flip-flopped over, just like Henry's was, to life in prison. Okay, I'm going to just put this out there. If we know that you did that, and, yeah, why are our taxpayer dollars going to you being in jail, getting 3 square meals, a cot, someplace to sleep, a roof over your head, all of this stuff, and yet we have people who are veterans of our wars that are homeless and struggling and don't have health care. And okay, that's a whole different tangent, but you get where I'm going with it. So yeah, he was commuted over to life in prison, and so he would spend the rest of his life in jail. And I'm going to curl my lashes and put on my favorite, this has to be literally one of my all-time favorite mascaras, and this is the Lash Princess. It's like $4.99 at CVS or Ulta or Target, and it is seriously, I have multiple high-end liners, and this is just amazing. I mean, for real. Check it out if you haven't. If you haven't, where have you been? Anyways, so he was commuted over to life, like I said. Kind of lose my place when I start talking about all the other stuff. DNA evidence did link Henry and Ottis to multiple murders, but they still only got charged with 3. Henry had 3 and Ottis 6. So, just going to put that out there. Ottis Toole did, in fact, pass on at the young age of 49, so that was actually really young to pass away, but he did die of natural causes, and he died September 15th of 1996. But before he died, he did confess to some really important murders, including one that you guys are going to probably recognize, especially if you're around my age. Milani Make It Last setting spray, per usual. Now, I don't remember hearing about the murder because, well, I was just barely born. But I do remember the show that came out of it. So, Ottis Toole actually admitted or confessed to and was found the most probable suspect for this murder. And it was the murder of 6-year-old Adam Walsh, who was murdered and beheaded in 1981. Like I said, I don't remember the murder itself or hearing about it. I mean, I don't remember the murder itself, but I know hearing about it because the show that came out of it was by his father, who was John Walsh, and the show was America's Most Wanted. John Walsh's whole reasoning behind making that show was because of the tragedy that came to his family from allegedly Ottis Toole. And he wanted to help capture fugitives and prevent further horrific tragedies by putting these people's faces and names out there so that he could stop that. And I mean, I cannot respect him more than I do for taking this horrific tragedy of his child and turning it into trying to save other people and other people's children. I mean, that's just a phenomenal way of taking a bad situation and turning it into a strong, productive situation. That show brought a lot of people to justice. For lips, we're going to use Savvy Sienna in the Buxom Plumping Lip Liner. And then we're going to use the Buxom Flush and Soft Blush Plumping Lip Glosses. So like I said, these men were confessed to over 600 murders. And like I said, they had confessed to over 600 murders. They were only convicted of 3 and 6. And I keep repeating that for a reason, because I'm going to tell you. With the confessions of Henry and Ottis, 213 unsolved cases were solved. So if they only committed 3 and 6, why did another 213 cases become solved with their confessions? You see what I'm saying? Doesn't line up. But like I said before, the only reason I could think of that they wouldn't exactly convict them over and over and over and over and over again on 213 counts of murder is because you really only have one life to serve. And so they were already serving like life sentence. They were sentenced to death, and now they're serving life. Then they were serving life. Now these men have already passed on. But yeah, I guess that's the only reason why they did that. That's my guess. Also, even as far as 2018 recently, I mean, that's pretty dang recent if you think about it. There was what they called a 40-year-old murder It was made. The victim was found in 1979, and they nicknamed her Orange Sock because that's the only part of clothing that she was actually wearing when they found her. So that's the way they identified her. But in 2019, they were still processing over these cases and the confessions. And I'm sure there was a lot to go over because of the amount of information that they got from these men. But this woman was found near Georgetown in 1979, and in 2019 they were able to close that case, and they actually were able to give her a name, and her name was Deborah Jackson. And it is believed that Henry Lee Lucas, they called him the one-eyed drifter because he had had an eye infection as a child, and his mother had not treated it, so he ended up losing that eye. So that was his nickname. The one-eyed drifter had murdered her in 1979. But luckily now she at least has a name and can be put to rest properly. But that shows that they are still trying to take into consideration every single one of these confessions that these men did, which are 600 or over 600 confessions of different murders. And with that, they are still continuing to this day, decades and decades later, trying to identify and give closure to the families and the unsolved cases that are out there. So this was the story of Ottis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this case, and I appreciate you guys. Please stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and this is the look for today. Natural, no liner, just some mascara and some skin tint. You guys take care of yourselves. See you next time. Have a great day.